Hello, and welcome back to the Poetry Lockdown. We are at day 295, I believe. Um, yeah, so I've been committed to doing these poetry videos, good times and bad times. Been some really crazy times during this year, and definitely some bad times right now. I'm feeling disheartened, discouraged. Don't know what to make sense of my own country. So poetry, that's what I got. That's what I got to make sense of my own country. So. Um, There was a really good poetry teacher I had once. Took a workshop with him, and he said one of the things that he loves to ask poets is, what was it like to be alive at that time? That when we go to poetry, we want an answer to that question in some ways. This poem has kind of been haunting me for like the last couple of months, um, and I feel like it's a good model for me as a poet when I try to think about poetry in response to the days that we're living through. This feels like a good model for me as a poet. So it's a longer poem. Just gonna let you know, kind of buckle up for that. And it's definitely a narrative poem, so it tells a real story. So hopefully you're in the mood for a little storytelling. Here we go. It's called "The Curator" by Miller Williams. We thought it would come. We thought the Germans would come. We're almost certain they would. I was 32, the youngest assistant curator in the country. I had some good ideas in those days. Well, what we did was this. We had boxes precisely built to every size of canvas. We put the boxes in the basement and waited. When word came that the Germans were coming in, we got each painting put in the proper box and out of Leningrad in less than a week. They were stored somewhere in southern Russia. But what we did, you see, besides the boxes waiting in the basement, which is fine, a grand idea, you'll agree, and it saved the art. But what we did was leave the frames hanging. So after the war, it would be a simple thing to put the paintings back where they belonged. Nothing will seem surprised or sad again compared to those imperious, vacant frames. Well, the staff stayed on to clean the rubble after the daily bombardments. We didn't dream. It lasted 900 days. Much of the roof was lost, and snow would lie sometimes a foot deep on this very floor. But the walls stood firm, and hardly a frame fell. Here is the story now that I want to tell you. Early one day, a dark December morning, we came on three young soldiers waiting outside, pacing and swinging their arms against the cold. They told us this: in three homes far from there, all dreamed of one day coming to Leningrad to see the Hermitage, as they supposed every Soviet citizen dreamed of doing. Now they'd been sent to defend the city, a turn of fortune the three could hardly believe. I had to tell them there was nothing to see but hundreds and hundreds of frames where the paintings had hung. Please, sir, one of them said, let us see them. And so we did. It didn't seem any stranger than all of us being here in the first place, inside such a building, strolling in snow. We led them around most of the major rooms, what they could take the time for, wall by wall. Now and then we stopped and tried to tell them part of what they would see if they saw the paintings. I told them how those colors would come together, described a brushstroke here, a dollop there, mentioned a model and why she seemed to pout and why this painter got the roses wrong. The next day, a dozen waited for us. Then 30 or more gathered in twos and threes. Each of us took a group in a different direction. Castagno, Caravaggio, Bruegel, Cezanne, Matisse, Orozco, René, Da Vinci, Goya, Vermeer, Picasso, Uccello, your Whistler, Wood, and Gropper. We pointed to more details about the paintings, I venture to say, than if we had them there. Some unexpected use of line or light, balance or movement, facing the cluster of faces the same way we'd done it every morning before the war. then we didn't pay so much attention to what we talked about. People could see for themselves. As a matter of fact, we'd sometimes said our lines as if they were learned out of a book, with hardly a look at the paintings. But now, the guide and the listeners paid attention to everything. The simple differences between the first and post-impressionists, romantic and heroics, shade and shadow. Maybe this was a way to forget the war a little while. Maybe more than that. Whatever it was, the people continued to come. It came to be called the Unseen Collection. Here is the story I want to tell you. Slowly, blind people began to come. A few at first, then more of them every morning. Some led and some alone, some swaying a little. They leaned and listened hard. They screwed their faces. They seemed to shift their eyes, those that had them, to see better what was being said. And a cock of the head. My God, they paid attention. After the siege was lifted and the Germans left and the roof was fixed and the paintings were in their places, the blind never came again. Not like before. This seems strange, but what I think it was, they couldn't see the paintings anymore. They could still have listened, but the lectures became a little matter of fact. What can I say? Confluences come when they will, and they go away. Whew. Like I said, you had to buckle up for that one. Heck of a narrative. That was The Curator by Miller Williams. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say about this poem other than this poem rocks my world. It shakes me up. Um, and in this really weird and wonderful way, it gives me hope. Um, I think at the heart of this poem is attentiveness and really valuing what you have. Um, yeah, I mean, I talk a lot in this series about sort of like shifts or turning points. It seems like there's a couple, right? At 2 points in the poem, the poet says, "Here, this is the story that I want to tell you," and that seems important, when as a reader to think about. And the first time, it's when the first three soldiers come and they give the tour of the paintings without the paintings. And all of a sudden it kind of like grows and like the poem has this like incredible energy, like, oh my goodness, like crowds of people are coming to see. That was like a real shift for me. But then probably the like the huge shift, the shift that kind of takes your breath away, or at least took my breath away as a reader, is when he says, then slowly blind people began to come. And there's something about just um, I don't know, just the radical generosity of spirit, the interchange between the curators and the blind people listening. My God, they paid attention. That for me, just I mean, it almost moved me to tears when I read this at first. It's so incredible. And I hear this is a true story. Those of you who are real historians should check that up. I hope it's true because it's so beautiful. I think that's about all I got to say about that. But Miller Williams also was an inaugural poet. Thinking about all the craziness in our world right now. Hopefully, there's a good inaugural poet coming up to do justice to the craziness in our world, in our country, I should say. But he actually, I believe, was the inaugural poet for Bill Clinton's second inauguration. Wrote a really fine poem. Got to find it. It's not this one. But check him out, Miller Williams, terrific poet. So thank you, Miller Williams, for this poem. Thank you all for tuning in to Poetry Lockdown. Appreciate you. Peace.